So how many years has the magazine been around? So is it?
The magazine's been around for 30 years. I think it's 30 years, actually.
30?
31
so we're
years.
rolling?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. The magazine's been around for a little more than 30 years now.
Okay. All right, so then over the 30 years, then how would you say the magazine has changed and adapted to the changing climate of woodworking and power tools and technology?
Well, it's changed in a lot of ways. You mentioned a couple of them. But the main thing is that in the beginning, we were the only game in town, and that's why the magazine made such a splash early on, and it gave us a great advantage because a lot of people, our brand is the strongest brand out there, I think, because of that. And we had a sort of a captive audience. There was no other place to go for your woodworking info, really. Right. So they could kind of do it any way they felt like doing it back then, and you can see there was a whole lot of text, not quite as many visuals as we have today. It was black and white. And people were passionate, and they were willing to work their way through all this text without as many visuals in order to, grab that woodworking info that they were dying for at that time. Nowadays, there is a lot of competition. Mm-hmm. There's lots of woodworking magazines, competitors coming at us, and we have to realize that we don't have a captive audience. They can go anywhere, and we cost more money than a lot of the other magazines. So we'd better be as good and a lot better than everybody else out there. Right. And so you'll see our photography is much better than it's ever been in the past. Our illustrations are super technical and done by hand. You'll see a lot of our competitors doing illustrations with a computer program, things like that. Like I mentioned, our photographs are better. We have to be the best in the business at explaining how woodworking happens. Or we'll be out of business.
Then, in general, I know I've picked up old magazines and back issues, and actually I keep all these magazines around because a lot of times, there may be a certain tool in there that's not necessarily that model on the market anymore, but a lot of times the information is still relevant. So I guess that's got to be a challenge for you guys to know how to keep everything alive, interesting, and fun to read in a market like woodworking that doesn't necessarily change as quickly as, say, computers or other industries. So, is that a challenge that you guys are always up against?
That's a huge challenge. That's sort of one of our biggest challenges. And we kind of have a 5-year rule, and that is if we've covered a topic more than 5 years ago, we feel like it's fair game, that there's enough new woodworkers entering the market that we can cover it again. Mm-hmm. We would have to, because there is a finite amount of topics, unless you get so far out into the esoteric, really margins of stuff that only a few people would care about. So we have kind of a 5-year rule. That said, when we do it again, and we did it 7 years ago, let's say, we better do a new twist on it, and certainly with a new author who's got a new take on it and bring something new to the table. So that's kind of how we get around that.
Okay, so clearly there is quite a bit of competition. You go to Barnes & Noble or whatever, there's, a good 7, 8, 9 different magazines out there.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. What would you say are the finer points of Fine Woodworking that differentiate it from the competition?
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's no secret that we cost more than everyone else. We think that we deliver and then some on that price. But that puts the pressures on for us always to be better in lots of ways. I'd say the main difference between us is that we spend the money to go out and find the woodworking expertise and the best techniques in the world, wherever they are. We have a videographer going to Australia next month, so we're willing to go overseas to get it. Mostly we're in the U.S. and Canada, but we don't do it in-house, and a lot of our we don't do it all in-house, let's say. In a lot of our competitors' magazines, you'll notice that a lot of the articles and ideas come from the same staff of 5 or 6, and they shoot it in their own shop. And that makes financial sense. But for us, the magazine wouldn't be as good if we did that. Where our magazine will always be rich and always be vibrant and always be new and different and relevant because we're going out there into the shops of real people to bring the woodworking back here and then out to our customers. Right. So that kind of takes care of a lot of the different problems. Are you seeing a lot of different shops? Yes. Are the ideas relevant? It's easier that way. Are you getting great variety? Are you getting the state-of-the-art, the time-tested stuff? All that's true because we go out and about and and shoot the photos and get the ideas from out of house.
Sure.
So our thing is kind of like, we're not the experts. Still, we do know a lot about woodworking, most of us,
Right.
everyone who works here. We don't proclaim ourselves as the experts. We make a magazine, and we recognize the expertise out there, and we go out and get it and bring it back. That's
Okay.
kind of our...
Now, I know some other magazines that I've seen have sort of a similar process on how they do things. It's not all in-house. Most of it comes from, outsourced things. But a lot of times you can tell when you look at those articles. And in fact, I was actually really surprised the first time that I heard that most of the articles in Fine Woodworking are from, a user shop or the expert shop as opposed to a studio shop.
Right.
So what do you guys do to sort of maintain the quality level?
Yeah, that's interesting because one thing sort of works against the other. The stuff's shot so well that you almost feel like it was all shot in-house. What we have is kind of the best of both worlds. We get the ideas and the info from outside, but we send our own staff, our own trained editor/photographers out to shoot those photos, and we at the person's shop. So the person writing for us doesn't need to shoot the photos. That's a big misconception that people think when they submit an idea that they have to have these magazine-ready photos and they're intimidated because ours look so beautiful, and that's all because editors get on a plane with a portable light kit and umbrellas and a camera. This is what they do all the time. People are out of the office at least a quarter of the time, traveling the North America mostly, to get these photos that you see appear in the magazine. And then the other big difference with us and the competition is our illustrations are just so much better. And that costs a lot of money, to get stuff drawn by hand. It's technically right, but it looks as beautiful as the furniture. That's a big difference. And that's another thing that makes it sort of feel like it's all coming from in-house, like you said. But it's actually a nice blend of our in-house talent with the richness of what's out there in the world, Sure.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit more about the articles themselves, and from the point that an idea comes in to the point that it's finally in the magazine. What is the time frame there, and if you could just kind of elaborate on that a little bit.
It's a long, long road because the articles are so technical in nature. There's a lot that goes into it. You're going to see in a few minutes all that goes into an article. And so they have kind of a gestation period of probably 6 months to a year from the moment that idea is sort of a twinkling in somebody's eye all the way to where it gets on a newsstand in the reader's hands. It's probably the better part of a year in most cases, I would say.
That long? Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. And so editors have to be, an editor might be working on 10 different articles, and we always talk about it like being pots on the stove. You have to give them all a stir every once in a while, or something's going to burn or whatever. Take the lid off. It is tricky. The good thing is we actually do control so much of the process. We kind of have to make the magazine great. For authors who are working with us for the first time or who have worked with other people before, they're a little bit sometimes taken aback at how much control we have to exert, because they have the expertise, but we know our audience really well and we know how we make this magazine. So it's a real collaboration between us and the author on the text, on what photos are going to get shot, how they're going to get shot, a lot of it, even what we're going to cover and what's not ever going to see the light of day. The best authors are the ones who respect that collaborative process, and we respect each other. We respect them for what they bring to the table, and they respect us. So it's really collaborative, and it's a surprising amount of control we have to exert in order to make it great. We just can't be good. This is in the back of my mind constantly, that we always have to be great. And a lot of that isn't apparent from the outside. I think people get a general sense that the magazine's really satisfying, but I guess that's what this is all about, to find out how it becomes that good.
Sure. Now I know a lot of people who ask questions at the Wood Whisperer, I even see in forums, getting anything in a magazine is a big deal, to people, and it's sort of a little feather in your cap. You guys have a few different things people can do, whether it's an idea, article submission, or something like your gallery, which is renowned for having some great works in there.
Yeah.
What would you sort of outline as the criteria for that? How you decide what's worthy of being in there?
Well, if they go on our website, you're right. You mentioned a lot of the different ways people can get into the magazine. If you're a first-time author, you're probably not going to get to do a project, because we're throwing so much money at a project, it's an investment we usually don't make in a first-time author. So but there's other ways to get, lots of ways to get into the magazine. One is to, like you said, to just get something into the gallery, which is in the middle of the magazine. And the way to do that is go on our website, and it'll tell you exactly what to do. You fill out a form basically, and you submit some photos, and you fill out a form about the piece, the dimensions, how you were inspired to build it, things like that. And you submit it, and then you have to remember that not to take it personally if you don't get chosen. Also, stuff that doesn't make it in print has a sort of another chance to make it onto our website gallery. So that's another way to get your stuff out there on the Fine Woodworking site, you know, and feel happy about that. But the reasons things get into the gallery or don't get into the gallery is often not about whether it's a good piece. It just might not fit the mix we're looking for at a given time. We may be just getting way too much of a certain kind of thing. It's all of those things. But it's, you know, the design's got to be, we have a good sort of an inner sense of what our readers are interested in. And so the design's got to be something we feel people will be somewhat interested in. And it has to be obviously made well. If the finish is really goofed up or there's big gaps in the joints, you know, that's a problem. But that's just one way to get in. The other way is to do an article. And there we, again, go on the website, it'll tell you all about it. But there we're basically looking for about a one-page write-up about what is this process. It's usually going to be a technique. The first time you get in the magazine, it's some kind of a technique, a finish you do, a way you cut a joint, how you do some specific thing you do that you think is pretty cool, a jig you made up. So you just tell us about it in your own plain words, and send a couple snapshots, or drawings or whatever that help us understand exactly what's going on. That's it. That's it. Don't invest too much in it, but make sure we know through visuals and your description what's going on, and then be patient, and we'll get back to you. You don't have to be a great writer. We'll help you with that. We'll polish up the language if we have to later on in the process. You don't have to shoot your own photos, so you'll get a visit from our staff. It's kind of fun. We take you out to dinner, and we spend time together in your shop, and that's a really fun part of the process too. So.
A lot of the Wood Whisperer viewers have written in, and there seems to be a common theme to a lot of the questions. And I guess some people don't necessarily understand if they're paying for a subscription to a magazine, and that magazine has an online component to their offering. Why should they have to pay another subscription for the online content? Just wondering if you guys can sort of justify that for people, why it's more.
Well, I know where that comes from. It comes from the fact that they are paying a lot for the magazine already. I think that we deliver beyond the $35 a year that it costs for the magazine, or $8 an issue on the newsstand. But on the internet, also, the other factor is that pretty much all the content is free. And we're no different. A big section of our website, anything that is mentioned in the magazine as part of an article, like we'd call it an online extra, and you'll see a little blurb in the magazine for that, that's always going to be free. We'll never do a bait and switch on you. We'll never sort of tempt you with something and leave it out of an article in order to get you to pay online. That will never happen. So that's important that people understand that. And a good half of our website is free. All kinds of things are free on our website. Lots of articles, discussion forums, almost everything, some videos. You know, there's lots of things that are free on our website, tons. The things that we're asking you to pay for are things that go far beyond the magazine. You're paying for a lot of video that sets things in motion in a way that the magazine could never do and never did do in the past. And you're paying for our 30-year archive, our complete 30-year archive at your fingertips of the magazine going all the way back. You don't need to save your back issues anymore. It goes far beyond, I mean, it wouldn't be right, and we wouldn't be able to produce it and offer it unless we charged for it. It's more than fair what we're asking people to pay for. That's sort of part of our core integrity. We always want to make sure that whenever we ask people for money, we're delivering and then some. You know, and I think there's sort of a misconception that everything online we charge for, and that there might be some kind of a bait and switch going on. and there isn't. It's value-added stuff. It's stuff that really goes far beyond your magazine, single, one-off magazine experience, whether that's a video or a narrated slideshow or an article from 20 years ago. That's exactly what you're looking for.
Right. And I even realized that the that the archive of old issues is there. So,
Yes,
so if they subscribe to that, then they've got access to all the back issues.
that's right.
That's incredible. I mean, I didn't even know that. That's fantastic.
A lot of people don't know. We've had a really hard time getting the complete word out, the complete marketing message out about our website. It's the world's, I would have to say, there's nothing even close to it in the world in terms of a resource for woodworkers. And when you consider the fact that a subscriber who's paying $35 a year has to only pay $15 more a year, I mean, that's less than a cup of coffee a month to get an incredible resource. You go under there to find out how to, you go online to find out how to use your block plane better, and you'll come up with the 5 articles or 6 we've done in the past, everything you could ever want. Projects, complete project plans. It's pretty much all you need. You know, a one-stop, stop right there, resource for inspiration, technique, etc. You can even get live advice. I mean, that's one thing that people have to pay for, is for us to pay people to be available to give live advice about projects as they're ongoing and things like that. So,
cool. Now I've got 2 more questions that might take up a little time, but I think they're worthy. Okay, first of all, a lot of the articles that you guys do, you know, a finish shootout or a table saw shootout, something where you're really doing comparative work. Yeah. A lot of times we come up with these sort of pseudo-scientific, you know, analyses of the results. And you know, coming from a scientific background, and a lot of hobbyist woodworkers are engineers, they're scientists, they've worked in labs, and they know the scientific process. So they really, you know, tear these things apart and try to figure out, hey, did they really do what they were supposed to do?
right.
So when you guys put an article, I think one that's gained the most attention that I've seen was a finish comparison for the best wipe-on finishes, and I believe a why am I getting that? Minwax is the word. Wipe-on poly was given like the highest rating, but it was also the cheapest, most available material out there, and it shocked a lot of people.
Right.
So I guess the question is, how do you ensure that these results are accurate, and you know, is there a good amount of peer review that goes on there for you guys to double check someone to say, okay, this makes sense to all of us?
Well, when you think about, that's an excellent question. And tool reviews, tool comparisons, product comparisons are the hardest thing we do. We spend the most money on it, the most time, and you know, and when readers see it, it's just another article, you know. So it's difficult on a lot of different levels, financially, and then just time-wise and everything. If you could see how many people are involved in that process, it's sort of a self-reviewing process. First of all, we're not going to take care of any advertisers. We don't care who's advertising. I mean, you know, we're happy for their support, but from editorial side of things, when we go to do a tool review, we divorce ourselves from that. We don't care who is advertising with us. You'll see no correlation between, you get that a lot. People think there's a correlation, but if you go ahead and scientifically look at who's been winning tool reviews, you'll notice that it has nothing to do with some of our biggest advertisers. So what do? We sit down together. First of all, we pick the right author. In that specific comparison, this was a finishing expert who had an incredible array of finishing testing equipment. So he can tell all kinds of things: the toughness of the layer, the thickness of the layer. There's a drawdown test to check, I forget what that checks now, viscosity, or how much it would drip if you set it up on an angle. There's all kinds of things to test with a finish. How easy does it apply? How prone is it to drips and runs and sags? How much does it color the wood below it? All these different things that we have to test. We're not perfect. We pick a really good author, and I think we have very talented people, engineering-minded people on staff, some former science people and former engineering people, and we all get together and come up in a collaborative way and come up with something that is as scientific as it needs to be. sometimes some tools you kind of want to just play with them and use them for a while, and there's no real, fit and finish. Do the doors close nice, and are the guides easy to adjust? You can't really run a NASA sort of lab test for that. Right. So it's always going to be a blend of subjectivity, objective, as scientific and engineering wise as we can make it. We make sleds, things like that with weights on them, and time things and make it as scientific as we can. Also, we just cut a lot of wood with the tool and just see, after you cut the same thickness of board on a whole bunch of different saws, you quickly find out that certain saws are bogging down. It doesn't matter what the science is,
So on the subject of journalistic integrity, have you guys ever lost an opportunity or given a result in one of your tests that angered an advertiser and lost advertising due to that?
I'm glad you asked that, because we lose tens of thousands of advertising dollars every time we do a test. Someone's going to be mad. Our tests, one of the difference between us and everyone else is our tests are the hardest hitting out there. You'll notice a lot of other magazines take the easy way out. They'll do a tool test of just one tool. They never look at it head to head against the competition. We look at it head to head and come out with 2 or 3 winners. Usually there's a best overall and maybe a best value, something that we factor money in a little bit more heavily. There'll be 2 best overalls, sometimes 2 best values, at most 4 winners, usually more like 2 or 3, out of a field of 12. So that means 9 people went away kind of ticked off, even though they probably were, a lot of those were probably really good tools and finished in the middle somewhere. Readers want to know, what do I buy? So we've come up with this thing of having winners. It ticks off a lot of advertisers. We lose advertisers frequently because of that. In the end, they always come back, they usually come back to us because they know our audience is far and away the most passionate, the most committed, spend the most money on woodworking stuff. So, it is a difficult thing, uncomfortable in the short term, but it pays in the long term to do right by your reader. And so we know that.
Sure, yeah, they trust you.
Right.
And I guess tying into that, how do you usually get your tools? You need 10 table saws for a test. How do you get those?
Well, it's really, if we were to pay for 10 table saws, it'd probably be, it could be as much as 30 grand, 25 grand, plus all the expenses of doing the tool test. So what we do is we ask them to ship us one for a big tool like that that's really pricey. We just can't afford to buy them sight unseen. It's too much money,
right.
Plus all the other expenses of testing and stuff. So on a big test like that, we'll ask them from the manufacturers. They send out free samples. We ask for them right off the production line. We expect a quick turnaround. On smaller things, though, we'll just buy them. On some smaller stuff where we can afford to, we'll just buy all those marking knives or whatever, because we don't, what you're always hoping for is that you don't get stuff that's been tuned up. You can usually tell, though, when people are playing games with you, and we have to deal with that. You can tell that the packaging's not original, or that it's been opened, or, there's things you can tell that it's not right off the assembly line. So, but that gets to a really good point. In a perfect world, like I say, we'd buy 8 of everything anonymously. Right, but that would get into hundreds of thousands of dollars for a single article. So, it's just, there are real world financial concerns.
Oh, sure.
But again, are we, do we stand by what the results we're getting? We absolutely do.
Sure.
We often have manufacturers say to us, we think you just got a lemon. You should have gotten 6 of our tool and tested them all. And we say, well, if we're getting a lemon, what does that say about your production process?
Yeah, it says that there's lemons there.
That's right. That's right. So that's, we have an answer for that.
Yeah.